From the massive studios in Raleigh, North Carolina, this is the Cloudcast with Aaron Delp and Brian Gracely, presented by A Cloud Guru, bringing you the best of cloud computing from around the world.
Good morning, good evening, wherever you are. Welcome back to the Cloudcast. We are coming to you live from the massive studios here in Raleigh, North Carolina. You know, about a year ago, we had a chance to sit down with Julius Volz, who was the co-creator back at SoundCloud of the Prometheus project. And Prometheus project is one of the really leading projects around the container space in terms of monitoring large-scale applications, or really just monitoring containers as a whole. And we thought, you know, with the CNCF announcing Prometheus 2.0, which is coming out here any day now, that it'd be a good time to sit down with Julius and really see what's been going on in the last year, how it's evolved. Obviously, containers have taken off like crazy, and being able to monitor them in production is really important. So we thought we'd sit down with Julius, get an update on what's going on, some of the best learnings that he's found from the industry in terms of working with lots of different customers, how the community has worked around this open source project and so forth. And the other thing we're doing a little bit different with this show is it's kind of not a cross-promotional thing, but we had a chance a couple of weeks ago on my other podcast, PodCTL, to sit down with Julius and just talk about the basics of Prometheus. So for anybody that was sort of new to the space, wanted to learn about it and really learn about it in the context of Kubernetes, now that we're seeing so much interest in Kubernetes, so much interest in containers going on, we wanted to do a basics show with him. We will put that in the show notes as well. And we sort of did a follow-up with him the same day, which is going to be this conversation and interview that you hear next, really looking at Prometheus version 2.0, which is just coming out now. What are the changes? What are the architectural changes that are making it better, helping it scale? And also had a chance, because Aaron has been so incredibly busy with his day job, to have Tyler Britten sit in with me. So Tyler helps me co-host the PodCTL show. So for anybody who's interested in lots of in-depth stuff around containers and Kubernetes, there's always been a link in the show notes for that one. But Tyler sits in with us. We have a great opportunity to talk with Julius about Prometheus, and we really hope you enjoy this interview. All right. Very excited to welcome back to the show after about a year, Julius Volz, who was the co-creator and one of the founders of the Prometheus project. Julius, welcome back to the Cloudcast.
Hi there. Great to be here.
So, it's been a year since you were on the show. Prometheus has now been out and about for a couple of years. Give us a sense. I mean, when you guys were first building this at SoundCloud, like you've said before, this was kind of out of necessity to deal with this big growing system. Did you ever imagine that, it would sort of grow the way it does, the number of contributors, events specifically around Prometheus? Give us a sense of the craziness of how fast the project's grown.
Oh yeah, when we initially started out, I didn't even think we would be able to build it because it seemed like a bit of a crazy project to have a normal SRE job in a company, but then also build your own monitoring system. But the pain we felt was big enough to do it. And then it was really useful for us. But before we really published it and open sourced it and, it became known, we thought, okay, yeah, we should publish it and do all that. But probably people will not really get what it's about. And Prometheus does everything quite differently from other monitoring systems. It pulls, it has a different data model, it has a real query language, it integrates time series and alerting and all these new aspects where we thought, oh, yeah, maybe people will not be into that. But it turned out that I think the timing was just right. People were starting to have dynamic container environments and noticed that they could not effectively monitor them with existing tools. I think also ex-Googlers noticed this looks similar to what we had internally at Google. Yay, now it exists as open source and I can use it. And we were also just lucky by getting really, it sounds stupid, but we got onto Hacker News at the right time on place one, and that just jump-started everything in a very crazy way. And we were really blown away by the positivity of initial reactions. We had not expected it to be that positive. And since then, it's just been growing exponentially. I would almost say that for many use cases, it's kind of the default monitoring system you would consider. Like if you are running a Kubernetes cluster, it's at least kind of impossible to not at least stumble over Prometheus and maybe consider it as your primary monitoring tool. So it's been going way, way better than expected. And that's really amazing.
Yeah, I know we're going to talk a little bit about the new release that's coming out. Before we do that real quick, the last time we spoke to you, and again, this was about a year ago, you were getting ready to leave SoundCloud. You were going to go off and kind of start your own company. Give us a sense. I know some of the core creators and maintainers are in different places. Give us a sense of the community, like, where are the core people working? How many contributors and stuff do you have these days? Give us a sense of the project before we jump into what's new.
Right. Yeah. So I don't have a company. I'm just freelancing. So that just makes it a bit less overhead, simpler, I guess. I'm freelancing for various companies, helping them. Everything is somehow related to Prometheus, whether it's training, coding, or just consulting. Then there's other community members. For example, Brian Brazel has his own Prometheus company in Dublin, Robust Perception, and he also hired already his first employee. They're providing general Prometheus support. Then you have people at CoreOS like Fabian, Frederick, and others who are also super active maintainers of Prometheus. Basically, Fabian, for example, wrote most of the features that are relevant for Prometheus version 2 that are going to be relevant when it's released. So yeah, I guess we have Björn and Tobias who are still at SoundCloud. We have contributors from DigitalOcean as well and some other companies. So it's quite widespread, and there's different models that people find for how they can and want to and why they want to contribute to Prometheus. But there's notably not one single Prometheus company that dictates the direction or so, which I feel is important and also kind of is the reason we joined the Cloud Native Computing Foundation, to have that independence and signal that as well.
Very cool. Very cool. As Brian mentioned, 2.0 is about to ship soon. What's big and new in 2.0 that people should be excited about?
So so Prometheus 2 is mainly still Prometheus. A lot of the changes are under the hood, but they're still so dramatic that they will still be usable in a way. So, for example, the whole storage engine was completely rewritten and switched out, and the new one is way better in every way you can imagine. For example, huge improvements in general RAM, CPU, and disk usage, but especially disk I/O, which has often been a bottleneck when people want to ingest a lot of metrics, is now down by 99% almost, just by completely switching the way we do the storage. It also handles dynamic churn of time series better. Like if you have containers that come and quickly go away and you want to track them all individually in metrics, you will have many short-lived time series. And Prometheus was already good at that, but now the new storage handles that even better by segmenting storages by 2-hour time chunks and not having one big index that you need to sift through over all time, even if you're not really looking for old series. And the new storage design also enables more flexible features like snapshots, that you can take consistent backups of your time series database without stopping the server. So that's the whole new storage, which is, I think, the major amazing thing. And people have already been running it in production and testing it and been like, oh, wow, suddenly I can do things with Prometheus that just were not possible scale-wise before. Then we have something that we call staleness handling, where we have better handling in the query layer of series that disappear, time series that disappear from a target that we previously pulled from, and we kind of notice, oh, there was a series before and now it's no longer present, so we explicitly mark it as absent now, so it will no longer be returned. So this is kind of like a detailed thing, but it makes queries work more as you would expect them to work. It's kind of hard to explain, I guess. We have some changes around recording and alerting rules, mainly a new format that has been switched from a domain-specific language to just YAML, because that's the standard. And there's some new capabilities around that as well for how to group rules. And yeah, but otherwise, Prometheus is still Prometheus. There's no, big paradigm changes in there. And I think that's a good thing.
Simpler, faster, easier to manage. Always good things for an update.
Yeah, easier to manage, definitely, also just because the storage takes away a lot of the worries people had about resource usage and tuning it and all that. That just kind of goes away now. Also all the tuning flags are basically gone now. So
So, when we first talked to you, a year or so ago, you were coming out of SoundCloud. You guys had built this. It originally had been built for SoundCloud. Then you've got to sort of make it a little more generic so it'll get picked up by the community. What have you learned in the last year in terms of kind of best practices with working with lots of different companies? What are some of the best practices you've seen? What are some of the patterns that are kind of emerging in terms of how people are using it, or what people should think about when they're deploying Prometheus and trying to be better monitors of their environment?
Yeah, I think the main best practices are not so much about how you deploy your Prometheus server. That is usually relatively straightforward, but about how you instrument your applications is, I think, the biggest thing. There's a lot of ways you can shoot yourself in the foot by, for example, overusing dimensionality and blowing up Prometheus in that way by having too many different values in a given label value or so, like user IP numbers, or by, I guess you can build also topologies that will not be ideal, that will not allow you to make maximum use of Prometheus's pull model. Like if you have one big super exporter that you funnel all metrics into, and then from different applications, and you're maybe mixing application and host metrics in there, and then Prometheus just pulls from that central source, then Prometheus kind of loses the benefits of the pull model, where every single pull kind of has this health metadata of, was I able to reach a certain thing that I care about, and also attaching metadata to all the data implicitly. By knowing what I pull from, I know what labels to attach to it. And if I'm pulling from some big aggregator, that aggregator needs to already have all that information. So these kind of things, I guess, I'm not so sure. I mean, there's many things when I see them, I know them, but just listing it straight off the head is a bit difficult, I think.
Well, somewhat off of that, when you build anything, right, especially software, usually end up hating your code 10 minutes later, go back and rewrite that, and you're constantly making changes. And now that this has been going on for a little bit, what do you think are the biggest lessons you've learned, or something you wish you knew then what you know now?
Yeah, so actually I'm pretty happy with the way how technically everything worked out, because we managed to avoid the biggest problems, I guess, by having people on the team who already were very experienced in monitoring and had also seen some of the flaws in Google's kind of similar kind of monitoring system and helped us avoid them. So I'm actually pretty happy on that front. I think just in general on the open source project management front, it is sometimes a challenge for people to find a model that works for them, that they have an employer and maybe that employer only gives them a certain amount of time to work on Prometheus, even though they're really heavy users of Prometheus. Or me at the moment, for example, I'm freelancing and I'm helping various companies doing stuff around Prometheus, but those companies might not always be interested in, sponsoring a lot of upstream development. So this is still, I guess, kind of a challenge. I still don't know what the ideal solution to that is. And I think in general, making, open source sustainable is an open field with a lot of discussion. I think one thing that would have been good is if we had established governance earlier on, when, basically before it was necessary. Now we have a big group and we're still kind of trying to figure out now what the official project governance is, even within the CNCF. And still need to kind of agree on things, and it's turning out to be a bit difficult. If that had just happened earlier in an official way, then you'd have that structure and you could go from there, and you know who can vote on what and so on. So I think that's something I would do differently if I started a new open source project.
Yeah, it's interesting to me. There really hasn't become, I guess, Weave and Weaveworks sort of has a Prometheus as a service, but we haven't seen necessarily a Prometheus-only company emerge. Are you sort of surprised by that in terms of, trying to be kind of a commercial vendor? Are you sort of surprised by that, or is that kind of aligned to what you're seeing in terms of it's still an emerging community? I
mean, in a way, Robust Perception is a Prometheus-only company, or at least very much focused around Prometheus. And Weaveworks is heavily betting on it. You have also companies like GitLab. I mean, they do many other things, but they also see Prometheus as a very important part of their platform now for monitoring things you deploy via the CI in GitLab and so on. Yeah, it's a good question. I mean, I've also been approached plenty of times about potentially, creating a company just around Prometheus. And I've thought a lot about that, and it's just not really what I personally want to do. But I think in general, it would make sense. But you have all these different players kind of already, trying out these different models. Weaveworks has their hosted service. Robust Perception is offering support. CoreOS is also doing, some of that. They offer support around Kubernetes and CoreOS and all kinds of other things. I'm not such a busy business savvy person, so I'm not sure how easy it would be to still, get into that market and be successful. But it could totally work out. Yeah.
Now, one of the things that we're starting to see really take off, and again, it's a similar story, right? Coming from the kind of cloud scale companies that built stuff they needed, like Envoy that Lyft built, and that's starting to make its way into a project Istio, using some of these new service mesh, more advanced networking sidecar technologies, Linkerd, these types of pieces. How do you see Prometheus's role in those environments? It's that two sides of the coin of visibility as well as the capability. So not just, hey, are these things working right, but in troubleshooting, well, where's the networking going? Where do you see how Prometheus fits in with these new technologies?
Yeah, so technologies like Linkerd and Istio, the nice thing is that they give capabilities to applications without having to modify the application, right? They give you load balancing and health checking and all that, but they also include Prometheus metrics. So both Linkerd and Istio expose Prometheus metrics about the traffic that goes through them and so on. So now you can just point your Prometheus at those metrics endpoint and get monitoring for what your request rates are, potentially latencies. I'm not exactly sure what the exact metrics are there that get exposed, but you get some monitoring for free without actually having to change your applications. So that's really nice. It's kind of an out-of-the-box way to get better metrics, or to get some metrics started without modifying things. I think in general, I would still recommend people to also instrument their applications directly, because it gives you more control over your metrics and allows you to monitor things that are happening inside of your process that might not be visible at the edge when it passes through Linkerd or Istio. But in general, I think it's a good development and will help people get started with metrics easier.
One of the things that we've seen over the last couple of years, it's been interesting to see the rise of a lot of events that are very monitoring and operation centric. So obviously, you run an event, PromCon, Prometheus centric. We see things like Monitorama, Velocity has always had a lot around operations. For people that maybe don't necessarily always get to the events, or because they're cost or location or whatever, like, what are some of the other ways that people are around the community? Like, what are the good ways? What are the good Slack channels? What are other types of ways that people that are in the operation space or concerned about monitoring can get connected with this broader community?
Yeah, so I only really know about the Prometheus community. I mean, I know there's a Kubernetes Slack channel and all that, but for Prometheus itself, we are kind of old school. We have IRC channels on Freenode. There's one that's just #Prometheus and another one that's #Prometheus-dev for the more development related versus usage questions. So we have that. You can also use it over Riot, which is an open source messenger on the web. So we bridge all these into the Matrix messaging system, which is this kind of open federated, almost Slacky kind of thing, to make it a bit more approachable for non-command line users and all that. Then we have mailing lists. We have the users and the developers mailing list. You can find all this information if you head to prometheus.io/community. and you'll find the mailing lists and IRC channels and GitHub issue trackers there, and some explanations about, if you are interested in contributing a new feature, maybe send a mail to the mailing list first. If it's a big feature, don't just send a pull request or so without first asking about it or so. So there's some guidelines around that. Also in the contributing.md file in the Prometheus GitHub repository, that's also a thing to look at. In general, I think we're all happy to help both on mailing lists and IRC channels. Sometimes we might just not be able to reply because we're busy or asleep because we're in Europe or things like that. So don't take that the wrong way.
Right. And like you've mentioned, it's still sort of a European-centric community because a lot of it started out of Berlin where you guys were. Tyler, we've been picking Julius's brain for a while now. Any last questions or any last thoughts around all this?
No, I mean, I just as someone who used to be in IT on the operations side, this was always one of the banes of my existence. The tooling around monitoring and logging, because it didn't usually get enough attention except when stuff was broken, and then you were too busy trying to fix the broken thing. So I just love to see all the attention and new tooling and things like this. So I think it's an exciting time.
Very cool. Well, listen, Julius, one last thing. Where can people reach out? What's the easiest way for people to reach out to you or contact you if they want to, do some work around, have you help them in their environments or, pick your brain about questions and so forth?
Yeah, so you can either mail me at julius.volz@gmail.com or also find me under my full name on Twitter, twitter.com/Julius Volz. I think those would be the main avenues for reaching me.
Very cool. Well, listen, thank you for the time. Tyler, thank you for sitting in this week. And Julius, it's great to catch up with you again. And hopefully we get a chance to do this again sometime very, very soon. And best of luck to the whole team around the launch of Prometheus 2.0. So with that, folks, we're going to wrap it up for the week. And we will talk to you next week.
Thank you for listening to the Cloudcast. Please visit thecloudcast.net to find more podcasts, show notes, and everything social media. And visit acloud.guru for all your cloud training needs.